we are. It's the Hardcore Marketing Show. My name is Casey Cheshire, and I am so excited that you're here. The kind of excitement, and I don't know if you've ever had this happen where you're reading this book and you have to put it down to go take care of the real world, and then you just can't wait to get back to it. That's how I feel today based on the topic. And before we get to that, sponsored today by Cheshire Impact, helping you maximize your marketing automation in CRM. Ba-bam, CheshireImpact.com. And my guest today, super excited. She's amazing. It's almost like a sci-fi book come to real life. Marli Mesibov, welcome. She's the VP of Content Strategy at Mad Pow over in Boston and in Portsmouth. So welcome.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
So
Glad to be talking with you.
Yeah, and when we were chatting, we were talking about you are obviously the VP of Content Strategy. You're a content strategist through and through, but you work with people who are, I think we wrote the term down, they apply motivational psychology. So for everyone listening, this is like the Matrix meets content strategy. This is where marketing gets fun. So,
Yep.
So how do you describe yourself? You're using these psychology techniques and motivational theory in your content marketing, and the two and two go together. How do you describe yourself?
Yeah, it's a big part of what makes Mad Pow as an organization a little bit different, and what makes it so much fun for me to be working there. And really what drew me to the organization is that we're a UX design agency, but we've got these behavioral scientists, we've got a user research team, we've got, in addition to the broader UX design and that really user-centric focus. So as a content strategist working in the middle of that, honestly, I still think that content strategy is the right term for it. My team is content strategists, but we get right to the heart of what every content strategist wants to be doing, which is basing those ideas of how we get the right content to the right people in the right moments on data, psychology, research, and really understanding the core of not just what keeps people up at night, but also what will help them make long-term effects that benefit their lives.
Right. This is perfect. And we were chatting earlier, the theme for this episode ties to that marketing automation maturity model, that CSI, where we're helping people get these things set up. But we say, before you start building or clicking or even writing content, you got to know your buyer. And so that's why we got connected. I think it was on Twitter. And I thought this would be perfect, getting to know your buyer. We've had some conversations with people about personas. We've talked about really caring about the person, like B to H, be to human kind of thing, but really understanding that next level of human psychology. Right away, let's smash some myths. Let's just crush them.
Absolutely.
Right away. I'm sure you encounter these all the time. Everyone says write the right content for the right people, then they just totally go off on the rails. So smash some things for us. Break the china in the china shop here with some myths that you're hearing and you just want to clear up once and for all.
All right. Okay. So let's start with just a really basic one.
Yeah.
We can't give people motivation. That's just not a thing. We can entice them. We can engage them. We can educate them. We can help them understand the next steps, the connections between what they're doing. We can help them find their motivation, but ultimately we can't give them motivation. That's not a thing. So every time that you see something that's like, oh, this is the new motivator, and we saw it with Fitbit. Fitbit got really popular, really exciting. They said, oh my God, Fitbit is motivating people to exercise.
Fitbit. Right.
It lasts about 6 weeks. And because it's an external motivation, it's a new exciting trend. It's got social aspects. It's got all of these things that are engaging. But ultimately, in order for an intervention to be successful, it needs to connect to something intrinsic within you. It needs to connect you to something broader and bigger, because it can't just hand you motivation. That's not a thing.
Interesting. You brought up the intrinsic. So is there an extrinsic? Is there like an inner and an outer?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How does that work?
Well, we see it in education a lot. We see it, extrinsic motivation is anybody who gets this next answer right gets a piece of candy. Extrinsic motivation right there, right? Now, the idea is if you get that piece of candy often enough, ultimately you start realizing you're not just doing it for the candy, you're doing it because you feel pride when you get the answer right.
Yeah.
Now that's the intrinsic motivation. And
Ah.
so eventually, if the teacher stops giving out candy for right answers, you still want to give the right answer.
Now, is
Grades.
there danger doing one versus the other, the candy versus the?
Not
Does
really.
one
I mean,
lead
there's
to the other, or
danger.
how does that?
So ideally what you want to do is set up extrinsic motivators that will help someone connect
Yep.
to intrinsic motivators.
Okay.
So leaderboards, right? We see a lot of, when you talk about gamification and leaderboards and points and badges, again, the reason that those don't tend to help people long term is because eventually the wow effect of the extrinsic motivator wears off.
Got it.
Now, if you can connect the leaderboard to also something that someone wants to do. So for example, during those 6 weeks or so, maybe that the extrinsic motivator is working, if you can help them to also start seeing changes in their day-to-day life. So let's say that they get a point every time that they walk. If after 3 weeks of walking, they start to feel better, or they stop coughing so much, or they start to have fewer health problems, or whatever the thing might be that is actually going to connect to something that is intrinsic, then the extrinsic motivator has done its job. It's engaged them. It's grabbed them.
Cool.
And now, even though the leaderboard in and of itself isn't so exciting anymore, it doesn't matter because we've connected to the intrinsic. And all of this comes from self-determination theory, which is one of the theories that we follow quite a bit at Mad Pow. But there are tons of different theories of motivation. There's work by Skinner and by B.J. Fogg and a number of different behavioral scientists, some of which, honestly, some of it is just the theories that align best for a specific audience, and some of it is what research you've read or what studies you've seen that make you sort of choose one over another as the way to build things. But the self-determination theory is a pretty strong one that we feel is very important. And for the content strategy side,
part of it?
Oh, what?
Sorry, is that 6 weeks? Is that a magic number, or is that is there a certain period of time that the transition from one to the other?
No, not for the transition, but the 6 weeks is a number that I've seen thrown around quite a bit as the amount of time that it's actually what studies have shown is the amount of time that any new fad or technology is going to grab people.
Got it. So
that's actually more from a marketing piece. That's not even, that's not even on the motivation side. That's how long most of these trends seem to last.
Interesting.
So as a content strategist, part of what we're doing is saying, okay, we've got all those behavioral theories, those behavioral sciences and the behavior change theories, and we're saying, okay, well, how do we communicate that? Right? What is the terminology that reflects connecting this to your internal motivations? How do we use the voice and tone to engage people and to help them not just see the leaderboard as something new and exciting for the moment? How do we adapt a voice that is going to cheer them on? Another myth: fear is not a motivator.
Really?
It has a very temporary, it scares people for a minute, but it's not nearly as powerful as positive motivation. And so we try to focus our language and our content around the positive. We avoid judgmental terms like shouldn't or mustn't or should. We try to focus
in the content sense or in all life?
Like
fear motivates me. So I mean, I like the positive better for sure. So does that mean
does it long-term motivate you though?
That's a good question. Long-term fear.
So we see this with diabetics, for example. Nobody wants to lose a foot. That's terrifying.
Yes.
But it's a long-term change. Nobody's thinking about that when it's like, but I really want that cupcake. The cupcake's delicious. Yes, long-term, it's going to make you, in theory, lose your foot. And that's terrifying.
Interesting.
But it's not enough to keep you going day by day to affect changes, particularly because the changes are usually small things that we need to be doing on a consistent basis. And that's
Right.
really hard. So instead of saying, like, don't do this or never eat cupcakes or
Interesting.
you shouldn't have any sugar, we try to focus on what can you do? What will be helpful? What's beneficial? Right? What makes you feel better? What's going to maybe get you those points in that leaderboard in the short term, but then over the course of a few weeks or months, we can keep you engaged long enough to help you see that, oh, wow, now your doctor's not so worried about your sugar anymore. You're
Right.
not so groggy. You're not having the spikes and the sometimes heart palpitations. You don't have to worry about your foot falling off.
Right.
Like, those types of things are actually far more long-term motivating than just the fear factor.
Interesting. It will. I'll definitely. I made a note. We'll talk about, because I know you do a lot of work on the healthcare side, but
Yeah.
your analogy actually opened my eyes, because I was thinking about I'm running a triathlon in March,
Oh,
and when it was a
awesome.
few months away, I was like, well, but now it's 1 month away, and I was like, I put a swim in this morning, but because it was like this thing is going to be a world of pain in about a month. But I could see, if hey, you're going to run the Boston Marathon in 4 years, better get ready, or the
Right.
negative, the foot thing. It's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
horrible in 4 years. It's really hard and
It's just,
I don't know if we
yeah.
desensitize ourselves to it, or we just somehow get callous to it over time or something.
I think we just have too much going on in our lives.
Yeah, get distracted, right? Like, oh, shiny
Yeah.
shiny bird. Yep.
Yeah, it's easy as a designer or a strategist or somebody to be like, oh, well, obviously, if somebody has, continuing with the diabetes metaphor,
Yeah.
or example rather, it's easy to say, oh, well, obviously that's the most important thing in their lives, but it's not. The
Mm,
most important thing in their lives is that they've got a big exam coming up at school next week,
right.
or their daughter's getting married, or they have a job promotion coming up, or they're worried about the economic going on with the political situation right now. So
Right.
health is certainly a factor, but honestly, it's going to be more important to someone that I have a stomach ache today
Yeah.
than that I could have something major go down the road 4 years from now. Because who
Right.
knows? Well, I'm running the Boston Marathon in 4 years. Yeah, it could be painful, but I've got, who knows what could
I
happen
got
between now and
time.
then. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I could meet a trainer who wants to invest in everything, and I could win the lottery and not have to work anymore and spend all my time getting ready for the Boston Marathon. Who
Right.
knows?
You
It's
know,
too far away.
also, like a rainy day, you're feeling down, something stressful happened at work. You're like, you know what? Down the street, they've got this it's like short rib mac and cheese. And it's one of those things, as soon as you try it, it's
Right.
like, that was a mistake. But hey, it's like the short term. Hey, to your point, we're thinking about right now. And
Yeah.
sometimes the right now is, I just want to feel better. So that's interesting. And so how
Yeah.
do you and that's the self-determination theory. Now, what specifically is that? Is that theory around the wants and the needs, or could you encapsulate? I know you're not like the actual scientist. You're sort of applying this, but I'm really
Yeah.
curious, like self-determination.
Sure. So self-determination theory is, a lot of what we've been talking about is, like I said, the part where I do, where it's um, identifying how to use that core theory to develop things and to go farther.
Yeah,
So a lot of the examples we're talking about and the sort of short term, long term, that's not directly in the theory.
sure.
But the SDT, basically, it's a framework. It frames the motivational studies, the fact that there are intrinsic and extrinsic sources for motivation,
Wow.
and that they play different roles for us.
Got
So
it.
it understands and recognizes that there's social factors, there's cultural factors, there's a lot more than just well-being as a matter.
Sure.
The key part, I would say, of self-determination theory, and the thing that helps us as content strategists focus on, is that if you support a person's autonomy, their competence, and their relatedness, that those are the best ways to engage them. So autonomy is their ability to make choices. Again, that's getting away from you should do this, or you must do this, or you should never do this.
You
It's
can
saying
choose.
to them,
Yeah.
it's saying we, as a human, sometimes you're not even going to analyze it to the point that you and I just were with, well, but I really want this mac and cheese and short rib, the short rib
Right,
mac
just
and
do
cheese.
it,
It
right?
sounds delicious. You just
Yeah,
go do it, right?
right.
And that doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't mean
No,
you're ruined. It
it's
doesn't mean you're
human.
going to lose your foot or not run the Boston Marathon. It
Sure.
was a choice you made, and you
Right.
have the ability to make those choices and then to make other choices around it.
It
The
does feel
second piece,
nice to make choices. I definitely see that with people coming over
yeah,
from countries that don't have as many freedoms. They're like you guys don't understand how many choices you can make here. You can just go over here.
right.
Like, this is amazing. So yeah, just to be the ability to say, I want to go do this today. Or if you lack that, you
Yeah.
feel that internally that you lack
And
that.
that piece in each of us that just wants to say, like, it's part of feeling like a simple human right, that I should be able to make a choice, that there is not just one thing that I can have for breakfast. There is not just one way that I can move and
Right.
be healthy and be active. There's not just one job that I could have. Those simple choices really motivate people to continue down a better path.
Cool. And these are all positive because, like you were saying, that you see the much more
Yeah.
results from your positive in content as well. Does that tie? Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. Okay. Not like the
Absolutely. I mean,
doom and gloom content. It's more of the you're going to get a promotion type content.
yeah, and so, like I said, there's three aspects
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this, and the second one there is more what you're talking about, saying the get away from the doom and gloom. It's competence. It's
Okay.
helping people understand that they have the ability to accomplish what they're trying to do. And so we don't have to go for fear, right? It's not smoking's going to kill you, smoking's going to
Love
kill
that.
you, smoking's going to kill you. We all know that.
Yeah.
But there's a sense of, well, do I have the willpower to quit? Am
Yeah.
I strong enough to quit? What would I do if I didn't smoke?
Right.
There's for most people trying to make a change, there's some aspect, one of the barriers can be feeling a lack of competence. So from a content perspective, it's not like we just want to write everything to be cheerleaders, but we need to look for ways to remind people of their own competence or recognize it.
Right.
And again, this goes to, I think a lot of gamification tries to simplify behavior change theories and just say, great,
Yeah.
we'll just do the external motivation and tell them, hey, you get a sticker every time that you did it to prove your competence. Like, they've got the right idea. They
Yeah.
just don't go far enough at then connecting to intrinsic motivation. Because really what
Interesting.
competence is about is it's not about collecting stickers. It's about recognizing that the sticker represents that you have the ability to do this.
That's interesting. I'm like, my mind is spinning because I'm even thinking about this maturity model. It's 10 points, but if you do them all, you've maximized marketing automation. But
Right.
we can gamify that, but we need to take that so it's not just a checkbox or a score and turn
Well,
it
you
into
get so much more out of it,
something. Yeah,
right?
there's so much
Like,
more
if
that
you're
comes
doing it
from. Yeah,
well, yeah.
yeah,
If you're doing it well, if you're going through the check boxes, you're going to see reflection. You're going to get a good
totally.
return on investment. You're going to start communicating better with your audience, and you're going to see your audience coming to you. You're going to get all of these other metrics that help you recognize the value of what you've done. And so
Right,
it becomes not just about doing the checklist for the sake of getting the check boxes.
right.
And for some of us, the pressures and the values of the extrinsic motivators are going to be stronger than others. There are some people like me. I love checking off the boxes on my to-do list. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, a to-do list is just a list of things that never happens.
Right.
It has no power over them at all. So this isn't even self-determination theory, but this is basic behavior science understanding, is that every situation is different and every person or group of people is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to recognize that context, and there's never going to be a one size fits all. There's not just a, hey, content strategists around the world, do this one thing, and now you have applied
Silver
behavior
bullet,
change
yeah.
to everything you've done.
Right.
For every single situation, that's why we have a behavior change team, is to work with our UX designers and content strategists and take the research and say, okay, for this group in this scenario, as we're creating the personas, what are their goals and their objectives and all the things that we typically look at, but also what are the motivators that are going to be specific to them? How does
Right.
autonomy apply in this case? How does competence? And then the third one, how does relatedness? And that's sometimes it can be the social aspect. It can be how do they connect to the culture, to the outside
Oh,
world?
geez. Yeah.
How does this connect to sort of the bigger context of their life? Because
Is it
I
to other
can eat
people, or like related to other people, or like social community, or what?
other people, personal goals. It's going to depend, right? You've got some audiences. We did a project for rheumatoid arthritis,
Yeah.
and a lot of that group tends to be somewhat isolated.
Mm.
So to just throw in, oh, we'll find some way to connect you to other people, it can have benefits, but you also need some smaller goals in there that will just help them relate it to their values.
Right. I mean, I say people probably because I like people, but to your point, someone who doesn't like people, it's not about people, but whatever
Right.
they connect to, their
Yeah.
personal goals, their people
So
goals. Yeah.
yeah, your values. Your
Your
values could
values. I like
be
that.
seeing more of your family. It could be being closer to a community in general, or it could be honestly not being in pain and being able to make more choices and being able to
Right.
feel a sense of control. So that relatedness, it more often than not has a social element, but it's really about connecting to values.
Love it. SDT, the framework.
SDT. Yep.
See, now
Yep.
everyone listening, you can sound like a behavior scientist, or at least one that applies that into
You
your
get in
marketing.
trouble.
Like drop a little SDT here and there. Awesome.
Yep.
And that was all
Yeah.
based on the myth of not being able to, you can't give people motivation. You can
Yeah.
encourage it, you can help them find next steps or even find it, but you can't gift it to them.
Right. And so we have to understand the reinforcements, right? What's going
Right.
to feel like a reward, what's going to feel like a punishment. You know, and I will say, I mean, the reason that we use self-determination theory is that it is the richest and the best studied theory of motivation. But there are so many. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy
Sure.
is one that most people are familiar with. That's a theory of motivation.
Are there
Social
any you
cognitive
don't like? Are
theory.
there any that have been chucked out? Or back to the myths, are there anything else people are using that's not correct? Doesn't have to
So
be.
I was going to say I wouldn't know a specific theory
Sure.
that yeah, I tend to rely on the smarter people than me that I work with for that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
But there's a lot that we've learned in terms of content about just what does and doesn't work. I would say I'm actually I'd be happy to share with anybody
What
listening
doesn't
to this
work?
podcast. Yeah, we've got a Mad Pow one pager on how to write for behavior change.
Ooh.
And one thing that we found that really doesn't work is that people assume would is just keeping it casual. There's this sense because we're user centered, people say like, oh, okay, well, if I can just speak the way that my audience speaks, if I can just use their phrasing, their terminology, then that's the best way to connect to them, right? And it's unfortunately because the behavior change terminology tends to be very specific and very well researched, there are things that we'll try to write in a more casual way that ends up actually changing the meanings and changing the way that people will take it. And so anything that we write, we try to work with experts, subject matter experts, whether in the medical profession or in a specific, or with behavior change scientists, or also just doing basic usability testing to make sure that the way that we have shifted the language doesn't take away from what it was intended to do. And it's fascinating because in pretty much any other sphere, in marketing, certainly in most marketing, we rely on the content strategist to determine what is the path going forward, what are all of the touch points, and we adapt that from exactly what the audience tells us. But when we apply behavior change, we have to keep in mind that what our audience is seeing isn't always correlating directly to what they're doing. So when a great example is, there's a basic, I think it's, gosh, now I can't remember if it's Nielsen Norman or, no, Jared Spool years ago, I believe, had a video out that showed a usability test where someone said, oh, I would never click on this button, and then immediately clicked on the button to see what was there. And this was thrown around quite a bit as like, oh, look, you can't believe what users say, you have to watch what they do. So with behavior change, I would take it even a step farther and say that we see somebody say, I wouldn't click on this, and then they click on it and they say, oh, now that I'm here, yeah, I'm going to follow these steps. But if you follow them on a study over the course of several weeks or months, they don't necessarily. There are other barriers that come up. There are other blocks. There are all those motivational pieces that we were just talking about. So when we're writing for behavior change, we have to basically either do usability studies, almost like a clinical test, right, over the course of weeks and months, to identify how the changes happen, or we need to spend a lot more time with our subject matter experts and researchers to make sure that we are not just listening to what we've seen and heard from users, but also to what history and science tells us.
What you're saying reminded me of when we had Adele Ravella on here, and she was saying when we're going deep and interviewing and talking to people, first of all, she threw out those sessions where you have a lot of people all together, those sort of research pools, panels, at least for trying to really understand people, is like they're just going to say what everyone else is saying. But even when asking someone one-on-one, she was saying it's not the first answer they give. It's like, okay, that was your first answer. So they said X, and then you're like, okay, now tell me more about that. And so it was like digging below what they were saying, because you can't necessarily trust what they're saying at the very beginning. Interesting. And it also reminds me of that book, The Rational Buyers, right? Just the idea that we all think we're buying these things rationally. We may justify it. It's almost like we have an irrational idea that we justify with something rational. But really we just like that person or something.
Yeah. Well, and Dan Ariely did Predictably Irrational.
Yes.
Which is
I think that's
similar.
the one. Was it the Orange and Blue book? I think that was it.
And he talks a lot about, that it's, we understand how people act not because they're rational, but because they're predictable.
Right.
And we spend something like 10% of our time making a decision and the 90% rationalizing it.
Yes.
So
love that.
Yeah. So, as content strategists, I know we've been talking a lot about the voice and the writing piece, but a lot of it's about the touch points along the way. When we're figuring out whether it's on the health side with patients, or whether it's on the more marketing specific side where we're talking about buyers, we need to recognize that either way there's a need there, and there's a journey that they're going to follow, whether we're with them or not.
Right.
But we can help them to make the choices that we want them to make, that are ideally best for them, but that aren't necessarily going to occur to them, by educating them, by connecting them with their own abilities, by helping them recognize the power of their own choices, by relating it to their values. How
do you structure that? Maybe you could break that down. I love that the touch points matter. Is there a certain progression you like to use then, when taking people down this path, especially if you're this content versus this, or this touch point? Is there an order to that, or how do you decide what goes first, second, third, fourth?
Yeah, I mean, it's very context based. We use a lot of honestly what already exists. There's so much time and energy that much smarter people than I have spent building out sales funnels.
Sure.
And connecting that to that top level of the sales funnel is basically all marketing, all
sure.
It's all just getting brand awareness, just getting people to have heard of us, making that connection. And then if you look at the steps of the sales funnel that bring it down to conversion, a lot of it's about engagement. And so I see that as as almost a one-to-one correlation to what we're trying to do in health, when it's essentially the conversion is every day making the steps, making the choices to walk around the block, to get up from your desk, to make a healthy food choice, to record your anxiety or record your mood swings so that you can speak to a doctor, to take the step to call a therapist. All these things that are challenging and difficult for people to do fit that same model as getting somebody to click on your website, connect with you on Facebook, ultimately make the phone call or fill out the form, and purchase your product. So, I follow that funnel. I follow those journeys that have already been brought out, and we do love journey mapping workshops where we'll work with either the target audience or with the stakeholder team to see how they map out what does the ideal look like to them, right? What do they see as the steps that get somebody to conversion, whatever conversion might mean in this case. And then I like to essentially look at all of the channels that are available to us.
Right.
So if there are events, then we've got an IRL channel. Are we on Facebook? Are we on Twitter? Or do we have a blog? Are we going to conferences? Are we running conferences? Are we doing podcasts? Are we putting videos out on YouTube? Are we and it's not about creating more and more and more. It's about recognizing, what do you have today, and matching those channels, saying what's the right touch point, what's the right channel rather for each of these opportunities to connect. Because every time that we say it, there's a step, that is a connection. Even if it's just micro copy, it's something that they are receiving from us that furthers the conversation.
That's cool.
The journey, the conversation, the sort of, every time that they reach out to us, that's them saying something. Every time that we give them something back in the form of content of any sort, that's us responding, and we're trying to get them to then ask another question that we can answer, that prompts them to ask something else.
That's cool. I love the concept of mapping. Even at Cheshire, we do more like process mapping because we do a lot of technology, but the loose ends that we encounter where you put a bunch of stuff at the beginning and it didn't make it out the end. I love the fact that you're thinking about the motivational side. It's almost like you need to think about it from all the angles. Great, everyone's motivated, but that string of leads just went out to the ether and now no one's following up. Or you're following up,
but holistic.
But you're not really listening to them. So it's really important just to write that out. A little bit of that deliberate planning, a little bit of that process discipline, just to see how it goes through. I love that. This is great. I'm kind of like in a candy shop. I remember we chatted about a couple things. I don't know if we've already hit I can't even tell. Cognitive evaluation theory. Have we talked about that yet?
So I know we talked a little bit about cognitive theories in general.
Okay. There's that. There's also the social motivation too. Those two things.
Right. So cognitive evaluation theory has some similarities with self-determination theory. It's more about trying to explain how external consequences impact intrinsic motivations.
Interesting. Okay. How they impact the specific element.
Right.
That's
so,
cool.
We mentioned earlier, that's why I'm hesitating. I'm like, we kind of talked about before when we were talking about how
I know. It's like I just asked Elon Musk to talk about what a rocket engine looks like.
Not
so
really.
much more to it,
No. But it's like, again, like so much of what I'm doing is sort of saying, well, what's the right space for this? What's the give me some building blocks, and then I'll figure out how to place them so that we can help people walk across the swamp. I think I just mixed or invented some metaphor, but
I love it. I love metaphors.
So any new theory, I don't know if I feel like I'm like paging through a mental Rolodex of like, yeah, I worked with that one.
Do you have a favorite theory
Pull it
though? I know
out.
I'm just throwing them out at you, but do you have like a favorite one you always go back to, you gravitate toward when you're,
Well,
thinking about content?
self-determination theory.
Oh,
It's just so
perfect.
strong,
Yeah,
and and that's why I end up talking about it a lot.
totally.
Yeah, um, yeah. So I mean, cognitive evaluation theory. It's a lot of what it sounds like if you break it down. It's how your brain responds, how you kind of evaluate decisions. And so when we were talking before about rewards mechanisms and to some extent punishment as well,
Yeah.
it's how do those consequences, whether they're social, whether they're on individuals, whether all of those things, how does that impact your internal motivations?
Got it.
So, I mean, and a lot of the theories come back to that. I mean, even going to, like I said, the really basic of like Maslow's hierarchy, what that's saying is if you throw at somebody, if you say, oh, let's talk about how you can become the best at your job, and they're struggling with finding a place to live, that's so far out of reach. They're not going to be motivated to do that because they haven't built up to that level.
Right.
So there's no way to motivate someone, or again, we can't give them motivation, but to engage someone with that kind of work if we haven't accounted for the pieces to help them get there.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
And one of the favorite things, when I was, looking up some of the information, you have a really cool quote on your website right underneath you. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
You're talking about people don't look for
No, the
content strategy.
Einstein one.
I love that quote.
It says either write something worth reading or do something worth writing.
Oh, that's Benjamin Franklin.
Oh,
yeah.
Benjamin Franklin. Actually,
yeah,
Benjamin Franklin. Yep. Write something worth reading,
I love that one.
which you're doing, or do something worth writing about, which you're also doing.
Trying.
So how did you get into this? In terms of content, who are you? Where did you come from?
I think like most people in the user experience, broad world, I came through a twisty path. Patrick Neiman out in Seattle likes to say there's no front door to UX, and I am definitely proof of that. I went to school for theater. I was dead set on becoming a famous actress and a singer and a musician. I was gonna do it all, and I was gonna write children's books in my spare time.
Sweet.
I had it all planned out, and I graduated and started doing stage management. And I loved stage management. I just found that the organization of it and the details and being around all these creative people, but still having some structure.
Right.
And of course, as a stage manager, you have little spare time and less money. And at some point, I said, I think I need to branch out. It wasn't quite right for me. And a friend of mine pointed out that project management has a lot in common with stage management.
100%. And I got to say right now, God bless stage managers and God bless project managers, because I've been an actor and a director, and when that prop is right where you need it, or things happen the way you've asked them to actually happen, actors and actresses can be like cats, right? So it literally, so to have them all be in the right place and lights and everything, or at least people wearing the right thing, and they have the cane that's out to the plot, they have it in hand. Man, it's amazing. So that I can see that natural extension. By the way, kudos to go to school for it. Your parents let you do that? How did that conversation go?
I don't think I've ever shared the story before, but my mother sat me down a few months before college and said, most people would say this is very impractical and you shouldn't do it. She said, but I had an aunt who wanted to go to school for theater, wanted to become an actress, and her parents said she couldn't. And she was a miserable, unhappy person her entire life, and I don't want that for you. So my parents were incredibly supportive. they trusted that I would find my way into something, that it could be a path to somewhere else. They both
Right.
had windy careers as well, and I'm very incredibly grateful that they both actually ended up in education and felt that the best way to become a well-rounded person and to educate yourself and to find your place in life is to follow your passions and see
Oh,
what happens.
100%. Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. I as a project manager, I ended up project managing a UX company. I went to a UX conference and heard Christina Halverson speaking about content strategy,
Now, for everyone
and it just
listening that
clicked.
maybe knows, UX is user experience, right?
Oh, yes, sorry
How,
about
how
that.
would
Yes,
you how
it
would
is
you even
user
define
experience.
that for people? I mean,
Yep. The goal of user experience is to make the tasks that we need to accomplish mostly digitally, but it's becoming more holistic and within the world,
yeah,
simple, intuitive, even if we can, delightful. And
I
so
like
when we
that.
say that content strategy is about putting the right information in the right place at the right time for the right people, we're talking about creating a positive user experience. So I think of,
Mm,
and it's probably been kind of obvious as I'm talking about it, that I see content strategy as a subset of the larger user experience.
interesting.
Yeah,
That making it simple for, yeah, it's great. You've written this thing, but no one can find it. They're not inspired to actually read it.
it
They're
doesn't
never
have SEO. It doesn't
right.
have headers. So it needs to be good content is findable, which means
Mm,
findable via top 3 levels of the navigation, maybe, or accessible from the homepage. It needs to be usable, meaning that it needs to have, whether it's headers, tables, bullet points, a layout that just is clear, scannable.
right.
It needs to be useful, meaning it relates to what people are trying to do. That's where we get into a lot of the behavior change pieces.
Right.
And it needs to be searchable, which is SEO, using analytics to improve how we get to things, really following the user journey.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because I've always sort of pigeonholed UX in terms of like it's that one person who's maybe not as geeky as all the other coders on the app development team. The
Yep.
UX, let's make sure it looks pretty. This is like way beyond that. It's almost like I could drop what you've described, the idea of simple, intuitive, delightful. I could drop that framework on anything, that
Oh,
you
yeah.
like.
Everyone can have a UX bend.
Yeah.
I think that's why we don't have UXers per se.
Hmm.
We have UX designers who are designers that have a specific focus in making things usable, useful, intuitive, delightful. We
Sure.
have experienced strategists who look at the holistic, how do all the channels connect and how do we connect the business strategy to the user needs. We have UX researchers who are doing interviews and usability testing and all that. And then in the middle of it, it's like, UX content strategist was a little bit too long, so we just stick to content strategist.
Sure. I don't know. I might even add those two letters onto it. It makes it, it's almost like we need more UX in the world based on your definition, which I'm now making my own,
Yeah.
because it's all we're doing is just focusing on the user and then their experience, their related experience, which can't hurt at all for anyone. I mean, it's a great reminder,
Yeah.
especially if we're being deliberate enough to actually put it in our job description, but also in our how we approach things. That makes so much sense. I mean, so many times you hear all the mistakes in marketing often come from forgetting about the user or forgetting about their experience. Let me
That's
give you a
why we
crappy
end up
white
doing so much
paper.
work with marketing teams.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
I
let me give you a
mean,
crappy white paper and then let me call you the next day as a sales rep.
right.
None of that was positive, and you totally
Yep.
forgot about me as a user.
Yep. Yep. I saw something on LinkedIn recently that was like this story of how many times do I need to call someone before they'll listen to me, and it's like, oh my God, no, how can I connect with them so that I
Yeah,
can give them what they need, right? Like,
right.
we're not just sitting there going, hey, 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 we're
Yeah.
not toddlers.
I got a few
So
emails like that this
yeah.
morning, and what makes it worse is they're like forwarding the email they sent me the first time, which was not helpful
Oh,
spam. And they're forwarding it going, hey, just want to make sure you got this.
yep.
And I'm like, I hated you the first time. This is not helping. Yeah, this is not breaking down
Right.
barriers here.
Do I need to block you? What is going on here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
spam.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah. Which is
Man,
unfortunate because for all I
right.
know, they actually had something useful, but because they didn't bother to find out what I was actually doing
True.
or start an actual conversation. I'm actually really curious to see how the intersection of UX and marketing impacts our next generation of marketers, right?
Interesting.
So
How so?
so like I said, no front door to UX, except now there kind of is. Now there are universities that have majors in user
Oh, okay.
experience design. There are even a couple that have started now with content strategy. So everyone I know of sort of our generation who works in user experience and content strategy came from marketing or came from design or came from
Interesting.
theater. A shocking number of content strategists come from theater.
No kidding. That sounds like a
Yeah,
party right there.
I know,
Let me
right?
know
It
next time there
always
is
ends up
one.
in karaoke.
Perfect.
We come from these other areas where we developed empathy and we bring those skills to the work that we do now.
Sure.
The reason that I believe that the reason that I'm able to work with marketing teams and design teams and development teams and across realms of healthcare and finance and education and
Sure.
travel is because I I jumped careers a few times. I
Right.
am used to what are we learning next? What are we getting in here? And how did whatever I did last connect to what we're doing now? And how can
Right.
I tie it together? And what connections can I make? This next generation has both the extreme benefit of having gotten all the basics right off the bat, sort
Right.
of in school, but also is not bringing the sort of breadth of experiences. But at the same time, specifically when we're talking about marketing, now we've got more and more people who are in school today for marketing who
Yep.
are learning some of the things that, as you've been saying, like you and I brought in from the theater world and
Sure.
from other areas to recognize how do we actually create personas that connect to our buyers. That's not something that last decade's marketers necessarily had.
Mm.
And so we're going to have this whole new generation now that I think is going to in some ways be much stronger in the marketing world and in the content world and in the UX world, but at the same time is going to perhaps have a narrower perspective. And this is supposition.
Sure.
This is what I'm saying. So I'm so curious to see
Yeah.
how it actually ends up. Like, what do they actually look like? What do they know? What do they do?
Right. I wonder because as you were describing that, I think I realized why I haven't thought about UX, and that is because you mentioned the UX designers. So I know what great design looks like. I know it. I mean, the Cheshire Impact logo, and Brianna on the Cheshire team, she's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I mean, I can describe things, and I know when things look bad. If I'm working with some other person, I'm like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
horrible. But when I see really good design, or really even an app or just graphics, I'm like, this is beautiful. I love it. But I couldn't do that to save my life.
Right.
Right, you get some stick art from me,
Right.
and so maybe that's why I've always mentally thought of like that's the designer. I'm not in Photoshop all day or Illustrator, so
Sure.
that's not really my realm. But it sounds like it's more. So I don't know if that's even a myth now that UX is way more than the design
I
itself, or
think
the actual
it is.
implementation, or how do you resolve
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah. Well, we talk a little bit about how there's there's little d design, there's design in Photoshop, in Illustrator,
Sure.
in Sketch, wherever, and then there's like design, which means like creation, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So for what you're doing is design. What you're doing, you are designing an experience. You are designing a marketing experience. You're
Sure.
designing the journey.
Yeah.
So we don't have a better word for that. We're not, unless we start calling ourselves, we're all UX creators. The UX designers tend to be the ones in Photoshop and Illustrator,
Yep.
but we're all working within the broader field of user experience, of
Experience.
creating those
Yeah.
fantastic experiences.
Huh. That's cool. I like that. I hope that continues to grow and becomes like
Me
even
too.
I'm not that college is a great mainstay. People are still graduating, no
No.
idea what marketing automation is, but if we can, which is like the backbone, but if we can build in, user experience class, or even to your point, the majors, the front doors, just to get people
Yeah.
realizing it's not just for the amazing artists of the world, but also the experience artists.
And obviously not just colleges, but also all the meetups and the General Assembly and
Conferences.
the
Yeah.
workshops and the conferences. Yeah, there are all of those other more direct, yeah, more direct sort of, yeah, the front doors that we're trying to figure out. That what is it you look for now on a resume
Right.
that tells you this is somebody who has experience.
So your front door was being a project manager at these UX companies, right? Is that how it started? And then
Yeah.
what happened after that?
So I went to UIE, whatever it was then, 15 or 16, and I think we're up to like 22 now. So yeah, it would have been 14 or 15, I think.
Dating yourself
And
with conferences, right?
I know, right? So I went to UIE one year, and Christina Halverson was talking about Ben and Jerry's. And Christina Halverson is one of the people who popularized the term content strategy. She was someone who just when she started talking about it in the realm of UX, she gave a definition that kind of took off. And there had been definitions before, and many people, and Rockley,
Sure.
Others in the field who had certainly built up to a platform to the point where then when Christina was talking about it, I think people were in a place to start listening.
Right.
And so she referred to her definition, and the brain traffic, her organization's definition of content strategy has been that it is the, let's see if I'm going to get this right off the top of my head, the planning for the creation of usable, useful content. And when she talked about mostly voice and tone at that particular conference, and how with Ben and Jerry's you could see their message and their message architecture come across on all these different pages. And she showed numerous different pages and how you could see their essentially their, what I would now refer to as their design principles, coming through, their philosophy, the mainstays that they identified as their goals coming through in the way that they spoke. And I looked at that and I said, oh yeah, that she had the spreadsheets and the organization to show how she'd gotten that far. Cool. And I was like, check. And she had the wordplay and the choosing the right terminology. And I was like, check.
That's
and
cool.
I left that and I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I was at a small enough agency that the head of the company said, yeah, if you want to start just offering content strategy as part of our projects, sure. And so we did that, and I got to start testing it out and seeing, what does this look like? What are people looking for? What are they asking for? And after a couple of years, I started kind of branching out on my own. I went freelance. I worked for everybody from tiny little startups to Motorola and an auto trader. And I started to figure out, first of all, that nobody was looking for content strategy. They were looking for something to fix this problem.
Oh, right. Now, what happened? You would say content strategy, like, no, we got that, or we don't want that?
Yep. The first couple times I'd send out either a resume, or I'd like connect with someone and start chatting with them at a conference, and I'd say, oh, I'm a content strategist, and they'd say, oh, okay, and like didn't really care.
Click.
And then and then I'd start getting into a conversation, sometimes the same conversation, where I'd say, well, what do you do? And they'd start talking to me. Oh, well, that sounds really interesting. That sounds really tricky. What how's that going for you? And then they'd say, it's going great. We're just kind of having a hard time figuring out what to get people. We've got all this gated content, and we can't really figure out if it's working or not.
Right.
Oh, what do you mean? Do you have any analytics going? Like, no, we haven't really figured out how to get that up.
That
Oh,
is
okay.
a familiar
You actually have
tune.
a lot of experience with Google Analytics. Yeah. You think it would make sense for us to chat about? Maybe we could work on something together. Yeah, but even if we had the analytics, like, I don't, would that really prove that was working? Well, not necessarily. I mean, what are your goals? Oh, we haven't. I don't know.
We don't really have any.
I could
Yeah.
run a workshop. Yeah, I could run a workshop and help your team figure out what the goals are and how we could make the gated content, what metrics we should be following to make it successful. Oh yeah, that might make sense. It's like, yes, that's content strategy.
Right.
So
Right. After they've clicked on the DocuSign. By the way, everyone, just so we're clear.
Kinda, yeah. Like just add a PS on any contract.
Do you think that's because they'd already experienced it in a negative way, or they just had it in their head that didn't really have any, they didn't understand what that really was?
I think it's still such a growing field.
Yeah.
I think it's still new to a lot of people. I think if you look at 10 different job descriptions for a content strategist today, you'll see 10 different sets of work.
If they even have
very
that as a
firmly in
title,
marketing.
right? If they even,
Oh yeah, still pretty new.
some other title, yeah.
Yep.
But what about with all the inbound? I mean, obviously you're in Boston, we're in the area, we've got HubSpot around. They've been talking about content for a long time. Has that helped?
Yeah.
In terms of the content strategy, or there's still this layer that needs to be met by what you're talking about?
It helps in more people recognizing that they need it.
Right.
But it's still, I don't know. Honestly, I don't even think it's a problem necessarily that needs to be solved.
Okay.
I'm not concerned that people aren't saying I need content strategy, as long as people are saying I need to understand how to make inbound marketing work, or I need to understand how to connect to my audience, or I need to understand how to better communicate and engage with patients. As long as they're saying things like that, I know that means I can help them through content strategy. Right. I don't really care if they use the exact words.
Sure.
Right? That's our job, right? Is to figure out what terminology is going to work for them. So.
Right. Motivation, right? What's the thing that they're thinking about? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, this is cool. I could see how that'd be fun. And then I guess it sounds like, just sort of the catch the story up. You just started doing it and helping people out, and then you're able to start.
Went to a lot of conferences. Yeah. I went to a lot of workshops. I found people at meetups who knew what they were doing and said, "Hey, what can you teach me? What can you show me? What can I practice? What am I doing wrong?"
Cool.
And I did everything I could to figure out what was this thing. And I also got lucky. I got in kind of on this sort of ground floor of content strategy really taking off on the East Coast. And so I had a lot of opportunities to try things out and find out what was working. And in some cases, invent, in some cases, I would talk to somebody and they'd say, yeah, I think we need some kind of, prioritization thing, but we don't have one. And I'd look around and I'd ask marketers I knew, I'd ask tech people I knew, and nobody had done anything like this. And I'd say, okay, well, I guess I'm going to create a matrix in Excel to evaluate how you're doing that, how you're prioritizing. Like,
love that. Yeah.
And we'll see how it goes, so.
Right. Sometimes they just need a little hand holding, that leadership. Come on, follow me. Let me walk you through this. You have the answers in there. Let me just help you get them out of your head.
Part of being a junior consultant, I think, was being willing to do the research that other people didn't have time for.
Research about the client, or research about the topic, or the both. Both, it sounds like.
Yeah, and to this day, we're in a fast moving industry.
Sure.
If somebody asks me about content strategy for VR, that's not my specialty. That's not something I know a ton about, but I know who to ask, and I know where to start looking, and I know how to dig to pull together what we can know and how we can figure it out together. Right. So I think being willing to put in that time is one of the most valuable things that anybody in pretty much any career today can do.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a little extra bit. It's those that actually do it. I mean, there's a famous quote from Eric Thomas: "Everyone has a grind, but or everyone has a dream, but not everyone has a grind. Not everyone
Right.
puts in the work. They have this what they want, but they don't actually go after it. They don't actually put in the
Right.
time to do that."
Hmm.
That's cool. So have you been able? Are you still doing some theater here and there? Or, it's hard, right? Because rehearsal, hey,
It's
let's meet
really
every
hard.
night.
No.
I can't really meet every night, guys. I'm gonna be in Chicago in this conference.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think my last show was about 8 years ago now. It was just got too crazy.
It
I
does.
still I still see a lot, but I stay on the audience
Yes.
side these days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would
How about
would
you?
you think you would
You
circle? I'm the same. I'm let even
yeah.
further back than yours. I haven't. I had a blast doing some direct all the theater growing up, and then directing, and then even a little bit of producing. But yeah, after college, man, just the working and hard to be able to put in those multiple days. I think I might circle back around to it at some point, though. I think it's really tied to what makes me happy. Or at least this does too, right? So this is like a show in itself, and I get to
Yeah.
learn things too.
That's been the big shift for me was when I did theater, I was thrilled and happy when I was in the theater and really not any other time. And now
Can relate.
this is the kind of career where and I know we kind of talked about this a little before, you can go to work and have an amazing, productive, exciting day doing that, and then you can go climbing in the evening. That's
Yes, yes,
not something
climbing.
you can do with
So
theater.
rock climbing. Are you doing a lot of indoor, outdoor?
I'm
Probably
I'm
indoor during the winter.
mostly indoor. I know. Yeah, I'm mostly indoor. I've got my climbing pad. I've got the place that I like outdoors, but every year it's like I'm in it more for the sport than the adventure, I think.
Yeah,
Like
break
I
that
love
down. So
challenging
it's
myself
not
and
about
pushing
conquering the
myself.
thing. It's more about just the
Right.
experience of it and just being in
Well,
that mode.
yeah, pushing myself to get up
Sure,
to the next V, getting up to the next level, like how
sure.
long, how far, that kind of thing. But I never feel like, oh, but I have to get, like there's this little Hammond Pond out in just south of Boston,
Okay,
and I'm perfectly happy to do my outdoor bouldering there. I don't
sure.
feel any great need. You won't see me up on the great tall mountains.
Not gonna be out in like the Mojave Desert, just crushing
Not
out
so much.
some tricky
No.
route upside down, doing some
I'll
bouldering.
watch somebody else do that. I'll be super excited for them. I'll
Sure,
belay.
sure. It's like I drive people in my house crazy watching Red Bull TV all the time,
Oh
throwing
yes.
throwing on some rock climbing or some mountaineering.
Mm,
That's awesome. Have you done any climbing up in New Hampshire or come up north
yeah, a
from
little
that?
bit.
They've got some cool
Yeah,
ice climbing too. I don't know if you've ever tried that.
I've been dying to, but I have not. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
You have to
way
let me know if there are
easier. It's
opportunities.
way easier. It's like a different
Really?
sport. Yeah, it's almost like because if it's a good piece of ice, you're and you kick your feet in, you just stick, and
Nice.
your ice axes they just stick. So it's less of that, find that mystical
Find the
spot.
crimp and
and then
yeah,
and then how crazy are your fingers? It's more of like I'm holding this thing, and it's almost you can just like sort of vertical, just walk up up the surface. So it's like different,
yeah.
but still fun. It's kind of it's like you get even with the rock because during the summertime maybe it's really hard, and then if it's
Yep.
covered in ice, it's like I got this. Do a little top
Yeah.
rope and make
That's
it
awesome.
happen.
Yeah, I like the
Totally.
the balance of I love the climbs. I like chimneys. I like anything where I can kind of throw a heel hook up and then, find the right how do I shift my weight over to this side to get that
Sure.
hand just perfect.
Every now and then throw a
So,
little cliffhanger,
a little bit.
little jump thing,
Oh yeah.
grab,
Oh yeah.
everyone's cheering.
I'm just under 5 feet tall, so
Oh
jumping
geez.
is not my forte. But being able to do a pull up and then just kind of reach
Right.
is that's my superpower.
But I could imagine if someone's like 5'8" or 6 something and planning a route in a gym, then you might end up doing a lot more jumping than you think you're going to be doing. If you're like,
Yeah,
that's not even near me, guys. Come on, what is
I
this? It's not
know. That's why I do a lot of heel hooks. I do a lot of things that you might not expect. A lot of hand foot matches, things
right.
things that everybody else goes like can't you just stand up and reach that?
Right, but it looks
No, I
really
can't.
cool. It's like completely
I'm going
over
to
the
find
top.
my own way up. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Man, and then you just plot that user experience all the way up that surface.
That's the goal. Got to
That's
build up a
it.
new experience.
Totally. Well, this has been awesome. I'm looking at the clock. Time has just like flown by.
Oh,
So,
no.
how can people get in touch with you? Twitter, obviously your company's
Yeah.
website. What's some good details and stats? We'll put them in the show notes, but just shout them out for people too.
Great. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Mars in the Stars, spelled correctly. Mars in the Stars, obviously no
Nice.
spaces.
No numbers either. It's original.
No numbers. Yep, just the words. I am available via email, marli@madpow.net. Marli is spelled Marli. If you spell it correctly in my email, but wrong when you say hi to me in the email,
Auto delete.
not respond.
Oh, bam.
Yep. That's probably my personal favorite.
Is that true? Like if I thank you for being on the show later on, and I spell your name wrong, it's just auto delete.
If I already know you, then I will assume it's autocorrect. But
oh, sure.
Yeah, I do see that though.
Hey, you gotta have standards. Email standards.
Seriously.
Sure. Okay, so we got email. What else? Twitter, email.
Email
website?
And Twitter. Those are the best ways to find me.
Okay.
I am also, my website's marli.us, the Mad Pow website, madpow.com.
Okay.
Great place to find out more about content strategy and behavior change. We've also got on the Mad Pow site, there's a blog there where I've been writing some best practices and sharing some one-pagers recently.
Excellent.
I do also share those out on Twitter. So, but yeah, best way to get a hold of me, Twitter or email. Or you can find me in March. I'll be out in Seattle at Convey UX.
Nice.
In May, in June, I'll be at Healthcare Design Conference, which is the Mad Pow conference. It was the first one ever to combine healthcare and UX design. Our theme is on change and behavior change, and we do have a content strategy track. So that's going to be pretty awesome. That's June 21st and 22nd at in Cambridge. So, yeah, hoping to see people there.
It's almost like, show dates. Like, hey, I'll be at this theater.
I know.
Date. That's awesome. Well, thank you again. We'll have to circle back around, and I'm sure there's like a million more UX stories we can talk about. So
excited.
Back on here and chat more. But thank you so much. And this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show, everyone. So thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me.